Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. My name is Brianna and this is for Pause in a Book. I make book and lifestyle related content, so if that's something that you're interested in, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below. Today I'm going to be talking to you about the best books of 2022. It is that time of the year. It is kind of the conclusion of the best of 2022 series. There will be a couple of videos that I'll have sprinkled throughout the next kind of week or so about like new authors that I found in 2022, books that surprised me, things like that. But for the most part, this is the conclusion of it. And you know, we're going out with a bang. We're talking about the best books of 2022. If you've been on my channel at any length of time, you're not going to be confused by anything on this list. You're not going to be surprised by anything. It's been a pretty predictable year. And I mean, like, here's the thing. I haven't loved a ton of books, but the ones that I've loved, I've loved. So, I guess I have 11 books on here. 10 spots, but 2 books are sharing a spot. And it's my rules, it's my channel. That's what we're doing. Unlike in my worst books of the year, I am doing this in a ranking from 10 to 1, my absolute best book of the year. I do want to say that as of filming this video, the HarperCollins union is still on strike. HarperCollins employees are still on strike. They are trying to get fair wages and just trying to get HarperCollins to come to the table. And as of right now, they are not. I will have all the information linked down below. I want to say that because there are a couple of Harper and Avon titles on here. Avon is an imprint of Harper. These are not new reviews. These are not books that like I just recently read. So there are already reviews on my channel, but I do want to talk about them. These are my favorite books that I read this year. So of course I want to talk about them, but I want to preface that by saying that the information will be linked down below for you to sign the solidarity letter if you are so inclined, and check out the information below. With all that being said, let's talk about my favorite books of the year, starting with number 10. That is going to be Finley, Donovan is Killing It by El Cosimano. This is an absolutely outrageous book. I'm just gonna throw that out there, okay? There is no logic to this book. It's crazy. But you know what? I was here for the ride. And boy, did we go on a ride. This book is about a single mother who is an author. Her ex-husband's like not the greatest person in the world, so she's trying to like co-parent. They have 2 young kids, and she's an author, like I said. She is trying to write this book about a woman who kills her husband. Not important. So she's talking about this book to her editor at a Panera Bread, and someone overhears her. Someone overhears her talking about the pitch of the book, not realizing that it's a book. Slides her an envelope with a bunch of cash and says, "I'm in trouble, please help me." And basically hires her to kill her husband. And Finley doesn't really know what to do because obviously like she needs the money. She's having problems getting advances on her books, and so she needs the money, right? So she does it, and you know, chaos happens. This book was just an absolute ride, and I had so much fun with it. There are 2 books in this series. I read the second one this year as well, and then I have an arc for the third one that comes out later in February, sometime early this year. And I'm very excited to get to it. These are just so much fun. Don't go into this book like with any like expectation of it being, you know, highly philosophical or great literature. It's just a fun time. Coming in at number 9 was one of the highlights of Pride Month. I had a very low Pride Month, and it was not a lot of great books, which feels homophobic, but one of the bright spots was The Romance Recipe by Ruby Barrett. This was the restaurant romance that I have been dying for. As you know, I work with food, I work in food, I've worked in food my entire life, my entire adult life. So when I read a restaurant romance, I don't usually love them. When I read any type of book that takes place in a restaurant, I always find things to like nitpick about, right? This one, I didn't do that. This is about a restaurant owner and her head chef, and I related to both of these characters so much. The restaurant owner, Amy, is a control freak. She's a very type A personality. I resonate with that on such a personal level. And then Sophie, the chef, it took her 30 years to find out she was queer. And like, you know, same, 27, but same. She is a grump in the kitchen, sunshine in the streets kind of person. See what I did there? Anyways, the plot of this story is that the restaurant is failing, and they try to get onto this TV competition just to try to get some publicity for the restaurant. And then, you know, there's a little romance. This book is spicy. For as short as this book is spicy. And it's so good. These sex scenes are so well done. There's a lot of drama between the two characters and like the other characters around these two. But I highly, highly recommend that you pick this one up. Coming in at number 8 was kind of my introduction to adult fantasy and really finding out what I like in fantasy. And that was City of Brass by S.I. Chakraborty. This was a recommendation from Cassidy over at Covers with Cassidy, who is probably like the fantasy queen on BookTube. I cannot appreciate this recommendation more. I am finding, and I found this after really reading this book and really, really enjoying the political aspects of it, that political fantasy is the subgenre where I thrive. I really, really like seeing different kingdoms coming together, or different people coming together, or people not coming together and fighting over said, you know, throne, whatever. The political aspect and the backstabbing and all of that is my jam. And this has a lot of that. This has a lot of family trauma, a lot of politics, a lot of backstabbing, also some magic, some epic world building. The writing in this book is supreme. There is half a page of just talking about how the rain is hitting the tin roof. And it is so masterfully done. It is just absolutely phenomenal. I've read 2 of the 3 books in this series. I will definitely be reading Empire of Gold in the like early part of this year, as well as the short stories that go along with it in The River of Silver that just came out in like October, I think. This is a very accessible fantasy. I am learning that there are things in fantasy that I'm not smart enough for. I really want to be, but sometimes I don't understand what's going on. But never in this book did I not understand what was happening. There wasn't a point where I was lost, where I was feeling my mind wander and not wanting to come back to this book. I desperately wanted to finish this book and just invest myself into this world. Coming in at number 7 is the only book I don't own on this list, and that is A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. This was a book that I read over Summerween, I believe, and this was another book where the writing was just absolutely beautiful. This book is from the perspective of Dracula's first bride, and it explores her story and how she kind of got roped into this relationship and how she was trying to find herself throughout this relationship. It's also queer, it's poly, and there's so much packed into this little book. There's a lot of talk of consent. There's a lot of talk of lack of consent when it comes to vampires and becoming a vampire. And this was it was so beautiful. And the way that it was written, and I think that you can kind of see this theme in this year's favorite books, is I am a fan of like prosy writing, but with intention, with purpose. Obviously there are some books where it's just like, oh my god, get to the point. But none of these books obviously have that. They wouldn't be on this list if they did. But they're pretty writing, but it's intentional. This book is penned as a letter to Dracula. And it's like in second person. It's you did this, and this is how I felt about it. And you did this, and you felt this way, and you said this. And it's basically her recounting their entire relationship together, as they bring in other people, as other vampires kind of come into the fold. And it was beautiful. I will 100% read other books that S.T. Gibson puts out. If they do put out books in the future, I don't know. But yeah, this was chef's kiss. Highly recommend this book. Coming in at number 6 is a very early book. Probably one of the books that I originally, when I read it, was like, did I just read my favorite book of the year? And that was like in January or February. And that was Neon Gods by Katie Robert. This book, obviously not like super rosy writing. This is a Hades and Persephone story, or retelling, and it's definitely a story that kind of turns the the Hades and Persephone lore on its head. Obviously, in the original story, Persephone is kidnapped. And so there's zero consent. This book gives all of that consent back to her, and gives her just so much power and so much control in this relationship and in her own story. At the beginning of the story, Persephone is engaged to Zeus, doesn't want to be at all. And so she escapes. In this Dark Olympus series, there are a bunch of characters that are the Greek gods. They're not gods. They are people that are holding political powers that associate with the Greek gods. So it's kind of more of a like dark mafia romance than it is a fantasy. None of them have like actual powers. The only really magical piece to this book is the world itself, in the fact that there is this veil, this fog that separates the like Olympus from Hades' realm, the underworld. Anyways, at the beginning of this book, Persephone is engaged to Zeus, does not want to be, and so she actually escapes to Hades and the underworld, and tries to seek refuge there. Basically, Zeus can't enter the underworld or there would be a war happening, so she's kind of safe there. Then, of course, there's a romance that happens. They start falling for each other, and here's the thing. I absolutely love a cinnamon roll Hades. It's why I love Lore Olympus. Cinnamon roll Hades is just, it's perfection. Absolute perfection. And he's an absolute cupcake in this. He has this like, hard demeanor and like this tough guy persona, but as you chip away, he's a softie at heart. This series is pretty controversial in the fact of like, which book is people's favorites. Most people either really like Neon Gods and didn't like Electric Idol as much, mostly for like the character development and the characters themselves, or they liked Electric Idol more than Neon Gods, because Electric Idol has a little bit more of a plot, a little bit more pushing the story. This doesn't have a lot pushing the story. This is all romance, but it's still a wonderful, wonderful book. Coming in at number 5 was The Surprise. Was the book that I was on sprints and I was like, am I about to put a Christmas romance novella on my best books of the year? And yes, I am. Meet Me in Los Feliz by Kelly Reynolds. Okay, this has so many things that I shouldn't love about it. It's a novella. It's 137 pages. I shouldn't have loved this book. But here's the thing. I think I just related to this character so much. She was not like likable in the sense of like, everyone loves her, but just like in a way that I could relate to her. She was funny. She was very sarcastic. And she had a lot going for her. She's a plus size girl, and she knows what she wants. She didn't want a long-term relationship. She had just, people have hurt her in the past. And so she just wanted a fling to get through the holidays. And then we have the Short King, and they do call him that. They call him a Short King. This book is 100% like a millennial wrote this book. Anyways, he's bisexual, but he, he's a cuddle bug, and he wants a partner. And he meets Nora and starts falling for her. And even though she just wanted something to get from Thanksgiving to Christmas, he's like, I can't let you go. And we love that. We love an emotional man. It was just good. This book is very much about found family and creating the Christmas that you want, not necessarily the Christmas that is expected of you. And it's, sometimes family is not all that great, and you gotta make your own. So for that reason, it's sitting here at number 5, which is surprising. But I'm here for that. Number 4 on this list is another book that's kind of out of the blue. And actually, I haven't heard a lot of people talk about this book on BookTube. It did actually make a Goodreads choice, like nominees. I don't think it made the finals. But for the most part, people on BookTube are not talking about it. That book is The Measure by Nikki Erlich. I know that this is probably really popular amongst like non-booktubers. Like I said, it did make a Goodreads Choice nominee. It was a Read with Jenna option. It is very much a book club book, but like I said, I haven't seen a whole lot of people talk about it on BookTube, and those that have given it kind of mediocre ratings. So if I would have just heard about it on BookTube, I probably wouldn't have even picked it up. I did pick it up because I was walking around my Barnes & Noble and looking at the tables, and the employee walks up and she says, "Oh my gosh, have you read this book? Do you know about this book? It's fantastic. I read it in one night. You have to pick it up." So I did. It was one of those, like, you know, buy one, get one half off books, because I think it was maybe the book of the month for them. And it sat in my car for a month probably, and then on my cart for another month, and then on my shelf. Like, it was a long time. And I went back into that Barnes & Noble probably 3 or 4 times in this span. And every single time she would come up to me and says, "Oh my gosh, have you read The Measure yet? Have you read The Measure yet? Did you read it? Did you love it?" And I was like, oh, well, see, my toxic trait is buying books and then not reading them. So I knew that I couldn't walk back into that store until I read this book. And I did in like a day and a half and was absolutely blown away. This book is definitely for fans of like the Midnight Library. It's very inspirational. It is very like, look at your life and like reflect type of book, which, if you remember correctly, the Midnight Library was a favorite last year. So it makes a lot of sense that this is on here. No one's surprised. This book is about the population waking up one day and getting this little wooden box on their doorstep. And inside the box is a string, and that measures your life. Some people had really, really long strings. Some people had really short strings. Nobody really knew what the measurement meant. It wasn't like, you know, inch per year type thing. No one really knew. It was very vague. Some people didn't want to look at their box. Some people did. Some people did the math trying to figure it out. And there was a lot of like social commentary on like what you could do if you had a long string, because like you knew you would be safe, versus what you could do if you had a short string. There were conversations about like how health insurance would look, because like you have a short string, which means you're probably going to be sicker, which means you shouldn't get insurance. That kind of thing. There was a lot of conversation about religion, about spirituality, about politics, and like there was a presidential candidate that was trying to run, but it got out that he had a short string, and they were like, well, you can't run for president because you might die in office. And I don't know, like, one of the things that I love in books is like sociological experiments and like just what the population would do if X, Y, or Z happened. I imagine that's why I like dystopian books so much. This was just a fascinating psychological study, and like it ticked off all my buzzwords for me. Because like obviously at the end it was like very inspirational and like, you know, whatever. But like that part wasn't my favorite part. My thing was like how people were reacting to what was happening. Coming in at number 3 is The Wedding Crasher by Mia Sosa. I read this book for a list that Goodreads had put out about like, these are the best books, romance books of the year so far. I had to test that theory. This one was definitely one of them. This is a book about a woman, Solange, and she is assisting at a wedding, and she overhears the bride talking to someone saying, "I don't love him. I actually love my best friend, blah, blah, blah." And so then she takes it upon herself to stop the wedding. And you know, when people, like the pastor comes up and says, "Does anyone object?" She objects. And obviously like the wedding is called off, blah, blah, blah. Come to find out that marriage was actually an arranged marriage. They were both getting married to basically further their career. The groom, Dean, needed to be married in order to make partner at his job. They were not going to take him seriously if he was a bachelor type person. So he was trying to get married just to like save face. So then he's like, well, what am I gonna do? I was supposed to get married. So then Solange and him start fake dating, start getting, you know, fake engaged. Fake dating is probably one of my favorite tropes. Like friends to lovers, and then fake dating. We love it here. Okay, so like this ticked off all my buzzwords. On top of that, she has a Brazilian family, and they talk about Brazilian food all the time, and they speak Portuguese throughout this, so it definitely held a special place in my heart for that. Also just made me very hungry for Brazilian food. Because Brazilian food is amazing. There are a couple of really hilarious scenes in this book. And if you know, you know. I definitely made a few friends read this book after I did, and then got text messages and DMs about those specific scenes. And you know what? I'm here for that. This was number 3, one of the best romances of the year. In the number 2 spot, it's actually 2 books, because I cannot decide between the 2 of them. And this is where we're going to be. They're the same series. It counts, okay? Don't worry about it. Delilah Green Doesn't Care and Ashley Parker Doesn't Fail by Ashley Herring Blake. we're going to talk about these two books together. In Delilah Green, we have obviously Delilah, who is a photographer in New York, and she is coming back to her small town to photograph her stepsister's wedding, and like chaos ensues. It's a hoot and a holler. Again, books around weddings, very fun. Maybe it was because I was reading this 2 months before I was getting married, and so I was in the wedding feels and all that stuff. I don't know, but I had a good time reading this. So she comes back to her town. She meets the people that, like, you know, she went to high school with, things like that. And she also runs into Claire, who was one of her stepsister's friends growing up. Claire is bisexual, and she has a daughter. Her, like, daughter's father is still in the picture, but they're obviously like not together, and they start an absolutely beautiful relationship, and oh my gosh, so steamy, so sexy, so wonderful. One of the things that I think this book did really, really well is just like how much depth the other characters had. Even the dad of like Claire's daughter has some backstory, some character development. The kid has some character development. Like they all have a little bit of backstory to them, some depth to them. They don't just feel like cardboard cutouts. Then the second book is Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail. The premise of this book 100% spoils this book, but after a series of events, Astrid meets Jordan. So Astrid is trying to revive her interior design business, and it's not something that she necessarily wants to do, but it's something that she's kind of been told to do. Her mother is very straight-laced, very no-nonsense, very this is how we are supposed to do things, and so she just kind of goes with that plan. She also thinks she's straight. But then she meets Jordan when she is renovating this inn for a TV like renovation show. And Jordan could step on me and I would say thank you. And also ask for more. I love her so much. Jordan is the granddaughter of the woman who is doing this design for the hotel or the inn, and she's also the lead carpenter on this project. They have very differing designs, so there's kind of this like butting heads, this rivals, but then like, ooh, she's cute. And it's very much an exploration of who she is, trying to define herself, trying to figure out her identity and her sexuality, because she's always like been told she was straight, and that's just how things are done. And then like she meets Jordan and it's not like, yeah, anyways. These two books were absolutely beautiful, wonderful books. They are like possibly on Brown sister level as far as favorite romances. All right, and that just leaves one more book. So my favorite book of 2022 is Ashes of the Sun by Django Wexler. I read this book actually for a video where I was reading the books that Cassidy from Covers with Cassidy has recommended. Not me personally, but it's like my Can I Trust My BookTube Friends series. And oh my god, this book blew me away. This book was sold to me as gay fantasy Star Wars. And at the very surface, that is what this is. It is about a brother and sister on opposite sides of a rebellion that are having to fight each other. I could also probably put Blood of the Chosen, which is the second book, in this spot as well, but for the sake of this video and having some sort of cohesion, we're going to say that Ashes of the Sun is my favorite book of 2022. So this is about a girl who is stolen from her family at a very young age and trained up in the Empire, or in the Order. And then her brother, who has spent his entire life, and, you know, blood, sweat, and tears, literally fighting that order and trying to destroy it, all because of what had happened to his family and what had happened to his sister. And we spend especially this entire first book with the two of them like on opposite ends. You're reading one chapter from one character and one chapter from the other, and it was so fast-paced, so interactive, where like you know that there's going to be this big thing at the end with the two of them coming together, and like the payoff was amazing. I think I read the last half of this book in like one day, one afternoon. I just sat in that chair and just read the entire thing. I was so enthralled with this book. The world building in this book is phenomenal. It's not in the way of like S.A. Chakraborty, where it's very prosy, very literary, very like pretty writing, but but the way that Django Wexler describes the world, the way that the magic system works, was just, it was so immersive, right? You knew what was happening. This very much felt like you were almost watching a movie or like playing a video game. That's how like this book immerses you. The side characters in this book, or in this series in general, are so great. They're funny. They are like, they have their own personalities. They have their own stories. They have their own like motivations and things like that. Nobody is a cardboard cutout. And this book was phenomenal. Like I said, I've read the first and the second book. I'm currently reading the third book right now. It's taken me a little bit longer, but I'm reading it on ebook because it's an ARC. It doesn't come out till February, and the way that it's formatted is just awkward. So it's taking me a little bit longer to read the third one, but I'm still absolutely loving it. And I will 100% be reading more books from Django Wexler in 2023 because this was phenomenal. And I cannot believe I've never read from this author before, but we're gonna fix that this year. For sure. This book, I think, definitely solidified what I really liked in fantasy, and things that I didn't necessarily like in fantasy, and has really opened up a wider view and a path for me to find the fantasy books that I like. For that reason, I'm putting it in my #1 spot. I went back and forth between this book and Delilah for so long on which one was going to be my favorite book of the year, but I think I already knew what my romance tastes are. I've been reading romance for so long. With this book, it just felt like a whole world opened, honestly. A door was open. I was able to pinpoint those things that I really loved in this series and find it in other fantasy books. So I have this book to thank. This is obviously a new author that I will 100% be reading more from. So for that and other reasons, this book is my favorite book of 2022. All right, guys, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for a great 2022. On to bigger and better things. So excited for what 2023 has. Thank you for sticking around this long. Let me know down in the comments below what your favorite book of 2022 was. And if you're not feeling chatty, you can put a heart emoji. That is all I have for you today. If you're new here and you have not yet subscribed, there's a little red button that you can do so down below the video. If you'd like to hang out with me more, the links to my Instagram, Twitter, Goodreads, and my Patreon are linked in the description below. There's an exclusive video coming out for my top tier patrons today, where I will be reacting to 1-star reviews of some of these favorite books. So stay tuned for that. Other than that, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.